Ta.
Thank you, Chair. Dame Judith, while serving as the Chair of the Independent Review of Building Regulations and Fire Safety, you actually called for a new regime focused, albeit initially, on multi-occupancy, high-risk residential buildings, which are 10 stories or more in height. Now, the government has proposed to extend this to buildings that are only 6 stories or more, but surely height isn't the only risk factor for buildings. For example, Lord Porter, during his witness sessions with us, he actually said that, and I quote, "The height is a bit of a red herring, really. It's the complexity of the building." So shouldn't we be using more complex determinants of risk, such as the vulnerability of residents?
Let me try and answer all of those points in turn. First of all, I recommended 10 stories and more because the data that was available, which we looked at the time of producing the report, showed a clear step change in terms of the number of fatalities that occur in fires when they occur in buildings of 10 stories or more. And that was data that even if you took Grenfell out of the picture and didn't include that in the statistics, there was a clear step change in the level of harm and fatalities that occurred in 10 stories or more buildings. But equally, at the time when I put that report together, I was clear that it should not stop there, and that the 10 stories or more was the starting point, and that we should extend the regime beyond there in due course. I would certainly agree that we shouldn't do it simply on height. There are other factors, and there are factors on both sides of the equation in terms of vulnerability of people, numbers of people, all of those things, whether they sleep there. But on the other side, there's also part of the equation, I think, that's about intrinsic protective measures in the buildings. So some buildings will be inherently lower risk because of the way they've been built. My concern is this: height is a very simple and very effective way of getting started on this process. And my frustration is we've got to start somewhere. I think it would be eminently sensible to develop a more sophisticated tool for determining risk in the longer term. But what I would hate to see happen is that becomes yet another reason for not getting on with it. Let's at least get started on this and then refine the methodology later to include more buildings, but let's not introduce yet more reasons for delay into this process.
Okay. The pace of change has been very slow, and we had evidence sessions whereby the likes of Grenfell United and others expressed their anger, disappointment and frustration at the slow pace of change. Now, in your opinion, would it not be better for us to be more ambitious from the outset with regards to the scope of the new regime?
I think the intent is very clear. The intent in terms of changing the dynamics of this regulatory process to one where you place clear responsibility on individuals is in itself an ambitious culture change that we need to drive. And it's really important that we get that in place as quickly as possible, in my view. So that, to me, is at the heart of this. My concern is if you try and do that and you extend the scope too far, in the first instance, you will make a task that is unmanageable. There's no doubt at all in my mind that to introduce a new regulatory regime of this magnitude, it will need to be done in a phased way. So although the numbers are only based on estimates, when I looked at 10 stories or more, we were talking about something like 5,000 existing buildings coming into scope. By extending it to 6 floors and more, that increases that number to 12,000 or more. So there comes a point that says, so in addition to doing all of the new stock that's coming through, we have that work to do around existing buildings. We have to manage that in a phased way. We will not be able to do all of that in the first year. That's for sure.